42 years ago, the world was introduced to a new novel written by English author Bernard Cornwell. The hero, an unconventional man for the time, a former rough-and-tumble sergeant, promoted for gallantry to the officers' mess. His adventures would continue for a further 26 novels and short stories, and 12 years on, his adventures would be adapted to the small screen. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sharpe's Canon. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Captain Rutledge. This series of videos will serve to look back at the Sharpe novel series by Bernard Cornwell and their TV adaptations directed by Tom Clegg and produced by ITV. For those unfamiliar, the Sharpe series follows the career of Richard Sharpe, the orphaned son of a prostitute who joins the army at a young age. After saving the life of Sir Arthur Wellesley, later the Duke of Wellington, Sharpe is given an officer's commission and joins the 95th Rifles, becoming allies with Irish rifleman Patrick Harper and leading his men across Portugal and Spain against the French Emperor Napoleon's forces. The first novel, Sharpe's Eagle, was published in 1981. Author Bernard Cornwell began writing the series as a way to support himself and his wife while living in America. Inspired by C.S. Forster's Hornblower novel series, Cornwell wrote a similar series about the Duke of Wellington's army during the Peninsular War. The character of Sharpe was based partially off Cornwell's early life as an orphan in London, not to mention a few other real-life inspirations. Lieutenant John Shipp was another common soldier who was granted an officer's commission for his gallantry while serving in India. Brian Masterson was an Irish sergeant granted a commission after taking a French Imperial Eagle at the Battle of Barossa, and Sir John Ely, who was a cavalryman that came up from the ranks to lieutenant colonel, served during the Battle of Waterloo. Sharpe's name came from a placeholder Cornwell used while writing. His favorite rugby player, Richard Sharpe. Just add an E to the end, and Sharpe was born. Cornwell would continue to write Sharpe series novels, chronicling further adventures in Spain, Sharpe's early adventures in India, and a couple of stories with his life during peacetime. The TV series was produced by Celtic Films and Picture Palace Films for ITV, directed by Tom Clegg, and adopted for the screen by a number of writers whom we shall meet as this series progresses. Since the production crew could not afford filming in Spain, a partnership was crafted which allowed for filming in the Crimean Peninsula, along with scenes shot in Portugal, England, and then Turkey for later episodes. And believe me, filming in Crimea was awful. The weather was either roasting hot or freezing cold, the food was lousy, several cast and crew members caught amoebic dysentery, and let's not get into the Russian mafia. Still, it was not all bad. A good number of cast and crew had fond memories working on Sharpe. Heck, Jason Salkey recently released a whole book regarding filming the series. I encourage TV series fans to give it a read. The original choice to play Richard Sharpe was Whitnell and I actor Paul McGann, and instead of Tom Clegg, episodes were originally directed by Jim Goddard. But just 1 week into filming, things changed. During a football game, Paul McGann pulled a muscle in his leg. Goddard forced everybody to soldier onwards, but Goddard proved to be super problematic, arriving on set hungover, not giving a darn about the actor's safety, even pushing poor Paul McGann too far with his leg wound. Things had to be called off. Paul McGann was let go, Goddard was fired, and new people were needed to fill in. Tom Clegg took over the director's spot, arguably more professional in this role, but still a bit problematic on set. To take over the role of Sharpe, the casting department brought in the second choice to play the character, Yorkshire-born actor Sean Bean. Bean had just been making a name for himself through the Patriot Games and a BBC adaptation of Lady Chatterley. Through Sharpe, Bean gained new attention in pop culture as a lovable rogue, going on to GoldenEye, and then...
One does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep.
Arguably, without Sharpe, we wouldn't have the one meme to rule them all. But let's not feel too bad about Paul McGann losing out. In 1996, he became the 8th incarnation of the Doctor in Doctor Who, and then he played Lieutenant Bush in Hornblower. And he's still alive and acting today. All well and good, but after watching the films and reading the novels, one does start to notice a few glaring differences between text and TV. You see, the original run of novels at the time of the TV series premiere were in the following chronological order. As is usual with the hectic world of TV production, though, actors come and go, shooting schedules change, and writers add their own twists to the plot. In short, a whole new order was in place for the TV series. This affected not only the plot line, but also the characters themselves, and in effect, the novels and TV series inhabit two entirely different canons. Naturally, we will cover the canon of each film and novel as we go along. Before we start, though, we need to cover Sharpe's early story, before he meets the chosen men in Sharpe's rifles. How did he get to where he is right now? In the novels, Sharpe was born in London in 1777. His mother was a prostitute, his father unknown, though likely a French smuggler. His mother died in the 1780 Gordon riots, and young Richard was sent to the workhouse owned by Jem Hocking. Hocking gave the young boy the name Richard Sharpe and forced him to grueling work picking oakum, not to mention a number of harsh beatings and near starvation. The only decent times in the workhouse were during Christmas, and even then Sharpe and the other orphans were subject to viewing by privileged children, like animals in a zoo. At the age of 12, young Richard was sent off as an apprentice to a chimney sweep, in other words, climbing up chimney flues and most likely getting stuck and dying inside. Seizing his moment, Sharpe escaped his apprenticeship and took up with a prostitute in St. Giles Rookery, Maggie Joyce. Maggie taught Richard the ropes of thievery and a few other things. Born in 1777, but he left for Yorkshire in 1792, which means his exact age would have been... different time, of course, but still... Aged 15 in 1792, Sharpe got in trouble after killing a gang leader in defense of Maggie. Out of necessity, Sharpe ran away to Yorkshire and found work in a tavern. Then 6 months later, he was forced to leave again after killing the tavern's landlord. In Sheffield, Sharpe found a way out of jail, taking the king's shilling. Richard was enlisted into the 33rd Regiment of Foot. His new master, Sergeant Obadiah Hakeswill. We'll learn more about Hakeswill later on. But for now, you need to know that Obadiah Hakeswill was a foul piece of work. He regularly beat, blackmailed, and brutalized the lower ranks, and pandered to the vanity of his commanding officers, just managing to keep his job. Just think if Sergeant Bilko was a complete psychopath. Hey, there's an idea for a TV series. Anyway. In 1794, Sharpe saw his first taste of battle in Flanders during the Battle of Boxtel, under the command of a young Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Wesley. He was also made corporal for a brief while, but Hakeswill and demotion. In 1796, the regiment and its full Colonel Arthur Wesley set sail for India. While in India, Sharpe fell in love with a young half-caste widow, Mary Bickerstaff, but further gained Hakeswill's hatred. One night in 1799, when Hakeswill threatened to force Mary into prostitution, Sharpe punched Hakeswill square in the face. Captain Charles Morris, playing crony to Hakeswill, sentenced Sharpe to 2,000 lashes. Before the full punishment could be carried out, though, Colonel Wellesley intervened, halting Sharpe's punishment at 202 lashes. The reason for the halted punishment? Lieutenant William Lawford. Lawford had to rescue his uncle, Colonel Hector McCandless, from Seringapatam, held prisoner by the Tipu Sultan. Lawford and Sharpe disguised themselves as deserters, with Mary Bickerstaff in tow to serve as an interpreter. In Seringapatam, Lawford and Sharpe managed to gain the trust of the Sultan's men, but wouldn't you know, Hakeswill gets captured and ruins everything. Lawford and Sharpe are tortured and imprisoned in the dungeons of Seringapatam alongside Hakeswill and McCandless. During this time, Lawford taught Sharpe to read and write using a torn page of the Bible. Before the Sultan can have the four killed as sacrifice, Mary frees them from prison, and the British obtain victory in the siege of Seringapatam. Meanwhile, Sharpe managed to catch the Sultan trying to escape under the city and killed him, stripping him of his jewels. After the siege of Seringapatam, Sharpe was made sergeant, and while picking up a load of ammunition from an East India Company fort in 1803, turncoat William Dodd massacred the whole fort, including all of Sharpe's men. Sharpe barely managed to escape with his life. He was later met by Colonel McCandless in Seringapatam, and accompanied the colonel to find Dodd and bring him to justice. Along the way, Sharpe met Major General Wellesley, witnessed the British assault on Ahmednagur, and escorted a French captain's wife back to the enemy Maratha forces. The Maratha commander, Anthony Pullman, attempted to win Sharpe over to his side with the promise of a commission, but McCandless, getting stabbed by thieves in the night, left Sharpe to look after him alone. Upon recovery, Sharpe and McCandless returned to the British lines. Now here comes Sharpe's most triumphant moment, the Battle of Assaye. General Wellesley's forces meet Pullman's Maratha troops. During the battle, Wellesley is unhorsed by Maratha cavalry. Sharpe steps into the melee, killing 5 of the Marathas before British forces arrive to help Wellesley. Dodd evaded British capture, but out of gratitude from General Wellesley, Sharpe is granted a battlefield promotion to ensign and a commission in the 74th Highlanders.
Scotland!
Oh yeah, I should mention, Campbell's back. Life proved difficult as an ensign brought up from the ranks, and Hakeswill tried to make Sharpe's very existence nearly impossible. Still, Ensign Sharpe managed to lead an assault on the fortress of Gallagher. He killed William Dodd and pushed Hakeswill into a pit of venomous snakes. Plus, Wellesley gifted him a special telescope, which we will learn more about later on. On the way home from India, Sharpe meets Lady Grace Hale. The two spark a romance on the passage home and live together in England as Sharpe transfers to the new 95th Rifles. However, Lady Grace dies in childbirth. Her lawyers confiscate the wealth Sharpe stole from the Tipu Sultan, and Sharpe is left penniless as the 95th's quartermaster. He remains quartermaster up until the retreat from La Coruña, where the novels and TV series pick up. The TV series differs here in a few respects. For example, TV Sharpe was born in Yorkshire to a prostitute named Lizzie Sharpe.
This is the place you were born in, then?
Conceived, maybe.
And was sold off to the workhouse for gin money as a boy. Of course, he was looked after by a kindly cook named Sally Bunting. As a boy, he ran away to London and stayed with Maggie Joyce. At some point, he joined the 33rd Foot and sailed off to India. He stepped in when Captain Morris and Sergeant Hakeswill beat a native Indian to death, and to keep their crimes mum, they had Sharpe flogged.
Obadiah and a blackguardly officer called Morris once beat near to death a native Indian for sport, till I stopped him. They blamed me for it, and I was flogged.
Before the siege of Seringapatam, Sharpe and his lieutenant, William Lawford, were held as prisoners in the dungeons of Seringapatam, where Lawford taught Sharpe to read.
We spent 3 months chained in a cell in India. He had a page of the Bible. In 3 months, he taught me how to read and write. How can you pay back a man who teaches you to write your own name, Captain?
Again, like in the books, he killed the Tipu Sultan and was promoted to sergeant.
You killed him.
Oh, aye. I killed him, all right.
Capital. Capital.
Then witnessed the massacre of his men at the hands of William Dodd. He also took part in the Battle of Assaye, in the words of Major Lennox, making a name for himself.
Sharpe, isn't it? Made a name for yourself in India. Battle of Assaye, as I recollect. I was there myself with the 78th.
Some point afterwards, Sergeant Sharpe returned to England and transferred to the 95th Rifles. It can be assumed he served alongside the Rifles at Orliça, Coruña, and Oporto, and remained in Portugal with the other detachments of the 95th since most of the regiment had been sent home. In April 1809, General Wellesley was attacked by French troopers. Sergeant Sharpe stepped in and killed the assailants, saving the general's life. Out of gratitude, Wellesley granted Sharpe a commission as second lieutenant in the 95th, where the TV series picks up.
How would you like me to find you something else?
As long as it's safe, sir.
That's my boy.
So, 2 backstories. So similar, yet pretty different. Both the TV and novel backstories have their pluses, like Sharpe's time in India with the novels, and his childhood in the TV series. The TV series, though, is a bit complicated in its execution. It may be due to multiple writers crafting these stories for the screen, or Bernard Cornwell not having Sharpe's backstory completely gospel yet, so arguably the novel series has the better backstory laid out. Nonetheless, this is just the prologue to this series. Stay tuned, as next time we'll be trekking through the hills of Portugal in Sharpe's rifles. I'm Captain Rutledge. Good day. Okay, and think I was enjoying my timeshare where it was. I'll get that.